All right, next paragraph, Miss Millie Germany. Although real quick, I'll address this last little bit of the first paragraph because I think I forgot to in my video last night. The tail end of your last sentence, could it be that this is precisely this way of thinking that causes you the difficulties you are experiencing in relating to other people and to find meaningful, genuine friendships and relationships, or to find success in a profession? So I addressed the part about the genuine friendships and relationships, and it's like, who the hell do you think you are? And I already explained, now I was raised by narcissists, actually. Well, highly narcissistic people. And so that sort of just set me up to attract narcissistic people in romantic relationships. And so since I've had my fair share of experiences with those kinds of people and always wound up drawing the short straw, I just shy away from romantic relationships these days. Don't get me wrong, I would love to be in one. I would love to have a life partner, but I just think that my picker is possibly, just permanently damaged and malfunctioning because I was raised to feel most comfortable with narcissists. But I have had meaningful friendships. But the thing about the success in a profession, well, that depends on what. First of all, that depends on what you consider to be successful. I'm an art teacher. I went to school for art. I studied art from the age of 4 when my mom enrolled me in art lessons. A lot of people, in fact, my last class that I just taught, I had a 63-year-old woman saying, I want to be you. I want to be her because I can pump out paintings like Bob Ross. And most people can't. And to them, it looks like magic. But to me, it's just second nature at this point because I've been doing it for so long. I've made a lot of money off of my skill as a visual artist. Although here's the thing, is I realized my freshman year in art school in Chicago that I didn't really want to be an artist. I didn't really want to have any kind of profession except to be a stay-at-home mom and a homemaker and a wife. There's the rub, isn't it? Like I was groomed and conditioned by my mother my entire life to be an artist because she wishes she was an artist, right? She has this romantic idea of an artist's life that she wishes she could have. She decided I would have it instead of her, and it turns out all I want is to be a stay-at-home mom. My mother had that option, by the way. My dad had a house bought and paid for in his family for generations. Per my mother's own words, he didn't care what she did so long as she took care of the kids. She was basically she had a car and she was allowed to do whatever she wanted all day, so long as she took care of my sisters and I. But that wasn't good enough for her. So she threw that shit right out the window to become a full-time nurse and then nurse practitioner. And now she has to work insane hours. Like she has to bring her work home with her because she runs a clinic. And, just to be able to afford her lifestyle now. She bought a nice big house and so on and so forth, and she hates her job. She hates it. She likes the power it gives her because she's the boss, and she likes the money it gives her. But other than that, she really hates her job. If she could, she would be some kind of professional artist, potter, clay maker, something like along those lines. And meanwhile, I would have, I don't know what I would give at this point. A lot. I'd give a lot to have had the same setup that my mother had when I was a little girl that she just threw away. And by extension, like threw my sisters and our lives into total chaos. Because, then going back and forth between 2 parents and 2 houses and fighting and nonsense. So, I just want to be, I don't want a career. I just want to be a stay-at-home mom. I want to be a homemaker. I want to focus on, I want to have, meet a life partner. I want to have some babies. I want to live in a, decent home and focus on my kids' education and on their good nutrition and on developing them properly. So that might be one of the reasons why, again, it depends on what your idea of success is, but that might be one of the reasons why I don't, meet your idea of successful, is I'm not really trying at anything when it comes to a profession because I already know I don't really want it. I figured that out my freshman year in art school, wandering around Chicago, trying to figure out what I was going to major in. And then I figured, I have to figure out what I really want. What do I really want to do? And then it boiled down to, none of this. None of this. But I was already, neck deep in student loans and being told incessantly by my mother that I have to be an artist, I have to be an artist, you have to be an artist, make your art. So I was kind of trapped into this life, if you will. But again, I don't think it's anything to do with my picking apart other people's lives and judging other people's lives. And in fact, so that's what you get into in your next paragraph here, and I'm going to address that. So, why do you think self-exploration excludes having a family? I don't think it entirely excludes having a family. I think that self-exploration, though, is severely dampened by having a family, at least for both parents, assuming that they're good parents, because once you have kids, your primary concern should be the development of your children, not your own development. I expect that you should have developed yourself at least far enough along, to know a thing or two about yourself, and to have gotten other desires out of the way before you settle down and have a family. Because once you have those babies, it's all about them now. It's not all about you. And again, speaking as somebody who was raised by a person who made it all about them, she still makes it all about her. Every conversation I have with her, that I try to start with her, where I'm talking about, anything about me, my interests, anything I'm unhappy with, how my feelings, she turns it right around onto herself. Bragging in a roundabout way about how, about this and that she's doing for this person or that person or whatever, or her hobbies. So that's why, I got really into psychology, and I realized if I weren't going to be a stay-at-home mom or anything like that, probably the other profession if any profession wouldn't be art, I should be into psychology. I should be a psychologist or something along those lines. Why do I think that? Because, well, let's see, I started taking psych classes in high school. I went on to take them even in art school. And going to art school, I realized that the other students there, they wake up every day. If you're a true artist, you wake up every day and you just make stuff. You're inspired to make things all the time. You turn something into something else. You create. I've met people like that. Like, they can't draw breath without creating something. I can go weeks, months, years without making something, without drawing or painting or anything like that, and I'll be just fine. It doesn't faze me. But it seems I can't go a single day without thinking about my own psychology, the psychology of other people, human nature, why people do what they do, if certain behaviors are good, if certain behaviors are bad, so on and so forth. Yes, there is such a thing as good and bad, honey. And so an extension of that is some people have bad habits, some people have good habits, some people have a bad way of living, some people have a good way of living. Again, I'll give you I'll circle back around to that when we get to that part of your little paragraph here. So yeah, self-exploration is not necessarily exclusive. It does not necessarily exclude family life, but you can only do so much self-exploration when your job at this point is to be furthering the interests and the development of other little human beings. All right. At that point, you can't just be going like, "Oh my gosh, I want to try this new hobby." No, your kid has a soccer game today. Like, you can't just. You need to. You're now on the sidelines. You understand? I think good parents understand that. You're telling me you work with autistic people? That's just insane to me. You don't seem to understand these very basic things, but you work with like very vulnerable people. Okay, honey. So I don't think, do I need to provide evidence for that? I don't think I need to provide, again, yeah, there is some self-exploration to be had from having a family. There is some, you can know yourself a bit better through having a family, but again, it shuts down a lot of self-exploration, the possibility for self-exploration when you're responsible for other little human beings. All right, I think I've explained that enough. I don't I don't feel the need to provide evidence. Surely those who explore all the possibility of one's own existence will sooner or later have to engage with the concept of reproduction, right? I guess so. I can't think of anything, an argument to the contrary right now, so we'll just go along with you on that one. Why do you think it is mostly men who indulge in self-exploration, and why are you so angry with those who spend their life turned inwardly? I don't recall saying in the video that you commented on here that it's mostly men who indulge in self-exploration. I don't recall saying that. If I did, I apologize. I amend that. Although I do think that women, let's just face it, like in our species, women are the primary caregivers. Whether they want to have children or not, most women end up with children. And typically it's the woman who ends up being the primary caregiver to the child. And so that tends to leave the men a little bit more freed up for self-exploration, particularly when the men just, run off and leave the family and shirk the mother with all the responsibilities, and or just he does the bare minimum and only pays the bills, but he's, out all night with friends or doing whatever. So yeah, just by virtue of the fact that the way the family is typically structured, men do seem to typically have at least more access to the ability for self-exploration. I do not think that men necessarily have more of a desire for self-exploration than women. In fact, I would say that women probably have more of a desire for self-exploration than men do. Because I know just my experience with men and women, a lot of men are happy to just sit around on their asses on the couch playing video games and kind of just tuning out of life, and they're not thinking about very much. They're certainly not thinking about themselves, why they do the things they do. Why do I just sit here playing video games all day, every day? Whereas women, are more inclined to do things like read self-help books and think about stuff like, why was I raised the way I was raised? Do I want to raise my kids the way I was raised? I don't like the way Jane down the street raises her kids. I don't agree with all of that, so on and so forth. That's a lot of self-exploration that I think. So yeah, I think women are actually more inclined and more desirous of self-exploration than men are. I could be wrong, but that's just been my experience between the two genders. So let's move downward. Why do you belittle and criticize other people's choice of the way they want to spend their life? Serial killers, mass murderers, narcissists, psychopaths, sociopaths. I think that the way they choose to spend their lives is worth criticizing and belittling. Don't you? And then also the way that, the parents poorly raised them in order to make them into what they are. That's worth criticizing and belittling, because we want to minimize the amount of psychopaths and sociopaths and malignant narcissists and serial killers and serial rapists and mass murderers and tyrannical dictators like Adolf Hitler, right? We want to minimize the number of those people in our society. And so in order to do that, we have to first differentiate between what's good and bad, right? And so we know, like, psychopath, sociopath, serial rapist, bad. That's bad, 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 very bad. We don't like that. No. And so then we have to figure out, okay, how do these people come about? Oh, well, typically, it's because they weren't raised correctly. It's because their family was not structured properly. It's because they were raised either by either by one or two highly narcissistic people, or, they had a dad who ran off and or died in a war or something. The mother was left with all the responsibilities. She couldn't juggle everything. And, there are a few different ways that this happens, but more often than not, it's because of, high narcissism in the parenting of, what have you, the psychopath or the sociopath. Dudes who go around raping and murdering women typically hate women. They typically hate women because they hate their mothers, and they typically hate their mothers because their mother was a shitty mother for one reason or another. Even if it was just she didn't protect him from his abusive father, one way or the other, that guy, gal, although they're more typically guys, they weren't raised right. They had their childhood robbed from them. Yeah, bad, that's bad. Yeah, honey, there is such a thing as good and bad. Like, so you work with autistic people? You don't teach them, do you? Like, how do you work with them exactly? Do you just give them sponge baths? Tell me you just give them sponge baths and you have nothing to do with their development. Please, because somebody who can't understand why we need to differentiate, but like we need to actually have boundaries. Certain boundaries, like there is good and there is bad. and we need to try and, squash the bad as much as possible and push up the good, encourage the good. Why? Because we don't want we want as little unnecessary pain and suffering as possible. Right? But perhaps somebody, I don't know, have you suffered a lot of pain? Emotional, psychological pain, physical pain, anything like that? Usually people who have, they get it. But people who live like, glamorous lives and they've never really had to suffer much or anything, they don't get it. They go off into some abstract fairy tale philosophy land, and then they start thinking things like there is no such thing as good or bad. It's like, yes, there is. Down here in reality, 3D world, for people who are, suffering in the, like people who are, I live in pretty much like kind of what could be considered a ghetto of Daytona Beach. I can tell you, people suffer. People suffer chronically every day, and it's not all their fault. You could make the argument that maybe some of it's their fault, but a lot of these people were just set up to suffer. Bad. There is good and bad, honey. So that means that there should be judgment. You should be able to judge between what's good and what's bad, right? You should be able to judge between, like, this is a bad life and this is a good life. If you go around murdering women and wearing their skin as a suit, that's bad. So yeah, I think I will continue to belittle and criticize other people's choice of the way they want to spend their life. I'm definitely going to continue doing that. That needs to happen. Our species needs to continue to differentiate between good and bad, and we should continue to criticize the bad. Because as soon as our species as a whole loses sight of, the idea of good and bad, well, then everything's going to be fucked. Then there's chaos. There's no boundaries, right? There's no borders. There's no rules. It's just chaos. Go watch Running with Scissors. Go watch that movie Running with Scissors. Towards the end, the main character, the guy, Augustine, basically says, like, the realization he came to in the end was, you need rules, you need boundaries, you need to have a bedtime, you need to have a curfew. These things make us feel safe. They make kids feel safe. They make it so that kids grow up healthier. But when you have no rules, because he was kind of flung into a madhouse by his mother, kind of sold essentially to his mother's psychologist, where there were really no rules. He could do whatever he wanted, and he felt very unsafe, for a large chunk of his teenage years. Anyway, but that's just one example. Indeed, why do you spend so much time thinking about and analyzing the way other people live? Why do psychologists do it, honey? That's basically a psychologist, that's their profession, isn't it? They listen to people talk to them about their lives, and they think about it and they analyze it, and then they try to give, at the very least they give an ear to the person who needs to maybe just unload and vent their frustrations, but also, to some degree, psychologists are meant to give some advice, to help people change their lives for the better, to make their lives healthier, make their minds healthier. So, and that, again, that implies that there is good and bad, right? Okay? You wouldn't be going to a psychologist. Most people wouldn't be going to a psychologist unless there was something bad in their lives, something unhealthy about their lives, their minds, their emotions, so on and so forth, right? And so, in order to make it good, they go to the psychologist and they talk to the psychologist about it. And the psychologist then also has to differentiate between, okay, good and bad. Yes, what you're telling me is bad. Yes, there are bad habits. Yes, you're in a bad relationship. It's abusive. It's bad. So you should get out of that bad relationship so that you can have a healthier, good life. I mean, damn, honey, like, I feel like I'm teaching kindergarten here. It's like, really, so I would say, like, I don't care how many degrees you have, and I don't care that you work with autistic people. I'm sure, like, on paper, you look like a good professional person. But the fact that you're saying shit like this on my YouTube channel tells me that you're not successful at all. Like, I don't care what you look like on paper. Your mind is not successful. You are not thinking. You're not thinking critically or analytically. You are in la philosophy land. You're so freaking far gone. Can I have your job? I think I would do better working with the autistic people than you, honey. Seriously. In all seriousness. And this is what I come across again and again and again. It's like people with degrees with these fancy professions pulling down a lot of money who don't know how to think. And it's like, wow, okay, so I didn't finish art school because I realized I didn't want to be an artist. Plus, I had to take care of family members. So I don't have the degree. I've had some good art jobs, you know, and I get commissions and stuff. But yeah, I don't pull down the kind of money that I probably don't pull down the kind of money that somebody in your profession pulls down, and that's feels very unfair considering all you have is a piece of paper, but what I have is a properly functioning mind. You know, like, I should be getting more money than you. That's just the way that goes. Like, I should have the piece of paper that says, like, yeah, I'm the smartest person. All right? Just saying. Anyway, so let's end it there. We did another paragraph. And then there's one more paragraph to go for this comment, but then I'm also going to address your most recent comment. So, all right. Bye-bye. Talk to you again soon.